Mel, thanks for joining us today. Can you say a few words about where you are right now, and what's your position? What are you responsible for?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to share. I am Mel Reyes, CIO and CISO at Getaround,
Mhm.
and have been here for a couple of years, navigating both sides of the fence, from IT operations to security.
hmm And get around. Is it where kind of private citizens offer their cars to as kind of like uh, Hertz, but for Airbnb for rental cars? Did I get it
Yeah,
right?
so we bridge the gap between Uber and rental cars
hmm
for consumers, right? We are the Airbnb of cars. So you have a car that's sitting most of the week. You can actually block out a few hours where people can rent it. They need to pick up somebody at the airport, or they need to go to Home Depot, or they can rent out your car for an hour, for the day, for extended period of time. And we've got a very broad reach. So we through acquisitions and other pieces, we've got U.S., England, Spain, France, Norway, and a few other areas. We also have the gig economy folks who want to rent a car in order to actually use it for work related or uh, ride sharing or car sharing
Mm,
pieces. So there's a
interesting.
lot of dynamics, yeah, that we end up playing. Get around and the reuse of cars has actually proven to reduce carbon footprint, the number of cars on the road, et cetera, by leveraging existing cars while they're not being used. So it's a really interesting concept overall, and my job is to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible on the back end and hopefully stays as
Great,
safe as possible
great.
as well.
Well, someone who is renting cars here now and then, I can attest that it's definitely an industry that's ripe for disruption. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. How did you get into cybersecurity? What was the pathway? What was the entry point for you?
I will say, having maybe a few decades under my belt in various industries and various roles, what I found was uh, all the domains
hmm
were what I tapped into, right? So I was a sys, I was a tech support, a sysadmin, and then I got into development, then I got into databases, then I to managing teams and managing APIs and managing everything from software to actual backend cloud.
hmm
So I surrounded everything at every step of the way. There was an infosec group where somebody, calling out, as the maturity model started to go through in different organizations I was in, calling things out like buffer overruns and SQL injections and everything else. So I had to either code it or have teams, focus on it. Then in the last couple of decades, CICD, having been part of 4 startups and staying in tune with the latest development practices, the latest languages. So I was always surrounding it over and over and over again, right?
hmm
In every domain. Everything from CCTV cameras, every end of a business. And it wasn't until I would say the last decade that it was purposeful, right? I was part of the authentication and threat modeling team at prior organizations, where I really got my hands into how do you create the step up layers, how do you create the layers of security for authentication, for security, as well as how do you take legacy applications. The group I was in had probably about 20 to 30 different interfaces, and they spanned over decades. So you had the oldest technology and the most modern technology. So
hmm
our efforts at an enterprise level was how do we inject a common step up authentication to reduce fraud, reduce risk, and I came into the pandemic having being managing 5 different teams that were working on integrations. When the pandemic hit, that doubled. So they moved more resources. So I was managing 10 different implementations at a time because of the importance of the threat modeling, the threat detection, and all of the other pieces that we needed to inject across all the platforms. So everything from customer service interfaces, headless, as well as the most modern languages had to be implemented very, very quickly, and we knocked it out of the park. So that was a full injection into those, as well as incident response, traceability, accountability, reporting. So it put together the decades of experience that I had into just a role. And cybersecurity is a bit tough to break into, but also to stay in and keep a sane mind. But it is fascinating, the advancements in the last, I would say decade that have been made. But cybersecurity has been around for multiple decades. So you've just been surrounded by it. You just don't know it, right? I've done network segmentation, all of the things that we talk about now that we put pretty names to it, right? Air gap, zero trust. I'm like, yeah, we pretty much had a implementation of that in some form or another.
Yeah, well, I think Kevin Mitnick back in the day, he was hacking into telephone companies before internet, right? Before anything else. He was most wanted. He was on the most wanted list, and he was before really anything, before mobile, before.
Yeah, So security is security at every level, right? So whether it was telephony, whether it was social engineering has been around forever, right? You get con artists, right, that were doing it, with paper, with business cards, with all kinds of other things. So it's just the maturity of it now being digital, being very aggressive with high compute power. And as I love this slide that I remember seeing a long time ago, and I kind of adapted and changed it. If you look at the 90s and into 2000, you had the script kiddies, right? You had folks who could create an executable that no one cared if you emailed an executable back in the day, right? You would open it up and and it would be an application, and then started to get a little bit more progressive, where you had really isolated intelligent hackers, right? So you're talking about early 2000s, right? Where that first decade was, you had some pretty intelligent folks that then started to get together to do this, and to create specific attacks, right? So 2010 and on, you started to. We are now at nation state threat level, right? So compute power is there, the programming is there. You can use and I don't want to say it, but you can use systems to create code for you, because I hate saying those two letters, right? That everybody's talking about for the last year. But now the advancements that are being made, the threats that are being made, are at an enterprise or nation state level. Now, and I love saying this because this is what I love, is hackers are thinking like enterprises, right? And they're thinking like agile processes to be able to get to something very quickly, and industries are falling way behind.
For
right?
sure,
to stay up.
It's interesting you mentioned that. It's every time I see this teenager in a hoodie hunched over a computer, it makes me laugh, because that's not what it is anymore. Not anymore. It's really, you see, I read Krebs on security, Brian Krebs, who's really does kind of deep dives, and sometimes he surfaces, when different APTs, they're at war with each other and they dox each other. So sometimes you see data dumps, and you see they have HR, they have vacation policy, they have incentives, they have profit sharing. It is an enterprise. It's segregation of duties. Different teams focus on different aspects of it. It's insane. And well, on top of that, they're well resourced. If it's whether it's North Korea, I saw the numbers. The group that focuses on just crypto, I think they are up $1.5 billion in less than 2 years. It's absolutely staggering. The resources they have and deploy, and still crime pays for certain people. Up to a certain point, which is scary.
Yeah.
But to pull on the thread, so you're saying that it sounds like technology was you had exposure to different aspects of technology, and this was the gateway for you to cybersecurity. Is it something which I always thought having a technical background is such a leg up for most people, just understanding the basics of all the building blocks. I think it's so helpful to figure out if vendors are full of it, or if certain will be sufficient. I think is it something you would recommend for junior professionals as they well, cybersecurity, it is a growing field, but as you said, it's hard to stay in it. But if you're technical and you, well, I want to try my hand at cybersecurity, it's something that you recommend?
So interestingly enough, last year I presented to the IIBA, and the IIBA is business analysts, right? And what I did was I presented to them that every industry, every job that's out there has an opportunity to bridge into cybersecurity, right? In a multitude of different roles, right? Super hands-on and technical and scripting and analysis and technology and networking, or the CISO role that's been developed by a lot of companies, right? So when you're breaking into either IT or security, the real factor comes down to what is your appetite to learn, to push yourself, and then how do you build out the network that you need, and how do you make that connection of, do I go into Discord and find a few groups? Who do I ask? How do I get in there? How do I find a mentor? How do I find a group? How do I find the resources to learn more about which approach to take? So what I coach people on is say, find a few courses, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, or otherwise, and try them, right? Try Python, try this, try that, try a Wireshark, right? If you start to feel comfortable with it and you go deeper, then you know that's an avenue that you can absorb and may want to work in. If you don't, then context switch. And within an hour of watching a video or trying to keep up with somebody who's setting up, for example, API-Sec does a phenomenal job with their free training courses on how to set up API security threat modeling, and the whole server from Cali to, right? If you can't keep up with the installer or anything else, then maybe you move on to something else, right? If you can't keep up with the instructor, then you're like, that's probably not something I want to commit time to. Then you switch it. Okay, maybe I'm more into InfoSec or GRC or compliance, right? So there are a lot of things that surround this. And what I tell folks is, if you want, any job that you have right now can be transitioned over, right? I have folks who have been on my teams who used to be a waiter, used to be a chef, right? Because it's all about logistics and planning and scoping, and so as long as you have the ability to be able to kind of absorb the information, the rest is butter. Now, yes, do you need a security analyst level 1 to actually have hands-on experience and know maybe CrowdStrike, or maybe know a few things, know how to pull logs together, how to maybe do some of the, I'll try not to throw too many vendors into the conversation, the querying, components around SIMs and SOARs, sure. Does it help that you have a baseline on the technologies in general? Yes. But what I will also say is, anybody who's career switching, don't discount the experience you have, right? Because you have logistical experience, business experience, and a lot of other things that I will tell you right now are the most important things to bring into a role where you actually have to interact with the business, and maybe you have to explain to them in English or business speak what you're doing, right? So if you start telling me that you just ran a Wireshark analysis to blah blah blah, their eyes are going to start to roll back. They're not. But if you said, I've been running some scans and we were able to detect some anomalies, so we were able to pull those together, right? And you have a different speak to this. So while the technical side of things are great, every role that you go into, you have to be able to play the full side of the fence, right? Just like the post that I just made about the CISO adding value and innovation, the CIO and or the CISO, but I posted on the CIO. If you go into it with a technology or pure security mindset, you're going to be living in an island of just all of your security folks. You have to be able to connect to the business. And at some levels, you have to connect to the board, and you cannot use the same language with a level 2, security engineer that you use with the board. So you have to build out that piece. Some people already have that language. Some people already have that communication, be able to translate, which is what I call myself, a universal translator. The Ferengi speak with the engineers becomes English to the board. right? And that's just as important. But having the energy, having the resources, and having the different groups where you can actually ask questions, those are key. Those are absolutely key.
It's interesting. Well, a couple of things that you mentioned that I think is very interesting. One is being curious and being able to learn and absorb. I
Yes.
think it's absolutely critical to your point, because even if you come with a different perspective, different background, different industry, if you're curious and you can stay curious and you can learn, it's the opportunity is yours. But the other thing that you mentioned, that which I also think is very key, you need to be excited about something for an extended period of time. To be,
Yes.
in other words, basically, you need to persevere, but also you need to continue to be excited. It's ever changing, ever evolving environment. When I was growing up, like those rudimentary, I'm dating myself, rudimentary programming languages, they were kind of all the rage. Obviously, no one is coding in them, but just understanding the logic certainly is certainly helpful. But can you, if you're stepping into this field, can you see yourself being excited about solving those puzzles, solving those problems, chasing the bad guys? Do you see yourself jumping out of bed because you want the challenge, you want the action? Because it's really, I mean, to be successful, to grow your career, to become an accomplished cybersecurity executive, it's not months, it's years, if not, I mean, decades probably even. So to sustain that, I think people are underestimate. And to double click on that, I know you probably have a lot of stories to share about the stress. I think probably recently more so than in the past, we find that our members, CISOs, VP, director level cybersecurity executives, they come under tremendous pressure from the board, from budgetary constraints. Can you talk to that a little bit? Like, what are your thoughts on what's going on right now?
So I know we need to time box this, so I'm going to try to summarize it in my head and try not to be as opinionated as I might be normally.
I would encourage you to be opinionated, because I think that's people fighting. So
I will be brutally honest. I have talked to some of the most phenomenal multi-decade CISOs that are out there, in across Fortune 10 to Fortune 1000 to startups and everything else. It is exhaustingly frustrating what's happening in the enterprise, corporate, or other worlds where I've got tenured CISOs who are like, oh, it's the perfect role, I can see myself doing a ton of different things there, and they don't get picked because they found out through connections or otherwise that they ended up picking someone not only that was younger, but it's not the important part, but cheaper, that had less experience. And I said to myself, okay, maybe that's a good decision. Maybe it was a good fit. Maybe that's what they needed. Maybe they fit all of the check boxes. But what I will say is the risk acceptance component about our life as a CISO, right? We need to communicate risk acceptance based on experience, based on knowledge, based on compliance, based on frameworks. And that comes through experience, right? Well, guess what? Younger, less expensive people don't have is experience. So there's a risk acceptance when you do have a job as a CISO. And now what I'm finding is, as roles are being eliminated and then junior or less experienced, I should say, people are being added, the companies are taking a risk, right?
they're taking aware of that they themselves.
They're highly well aware of the fact, right? So you do not take your Maserati to the local yokel mechanic, right? It's the same concept, right? I don't have a Maserati, so I wouldn't do that. But you if you have crown jewels and you have high revenue, and you're not going to find Bob, to fix your issue, right? You need people with experience and certifications and the knowledge to be able to get ahead of things, right? To say, that's great that you have an X number budget for this, but guess what? You're spending 1% of your revenue, where the rest of the industry is spending 7 to 12% of their revenue on a security program, right? Or 3 to 5, depending on what industry, what scale, scope, size. But then being able to quantify and qualify that to say, here are the risks, right? And then call out to the board, by the way, out of your 2.5 billion in revenue, 2 billion of that is at risk for catastrophic multi-week losses. I won't call out names of major corporations and enterprises that are being impacted as we speak, but 55 plus $1 million a day are being lost in the travel and leisure category.
A couple come to mind in the state of Nevada right now.
You know, I heard about something about that. Yeah, yeah. But you see what I mean? And it's but you know, that has its own circumstances and its own reasoning. But at the same time, if you're not learning from the multiple incidents that are happening out there and you're not communicating that, and you're not absorbing that as a business, as a risk, as a board, you're basically risk accepting a lot of potential of wrongdoing. The biggest problem, and I've heard this now for years across some of the best industry experts and speakers out there, so it's not my nugget of information, but how do you quantify zero incidents? How do you qualify zero incidents, right? So it's like a thankless job to say we're mitigating or we're reducing the potential risk of losing $3 to $20 billion or $1 million. But until it happens, no one believes it, right? So it's one of those things. Like, I'll give you the perfect example. As a CIO or as a senior tech leader, I can walk into your organization and say, your legacy systems are currently taking 1,600 hours. Let me put in an RPA system, automate that, and I can process all of those jobs, all of those pieces in 40 hours. And here's the quantitative savings that you're going to have. Easy, right? Because you could do the analysis. You have a number of starting. In cybersecurity, all you're talking about is the prospect of something happening, right? The of the number, right? And you can use FAIR and you can use all these things to quantify and qualify what might happen, right?
You can run an experiment. Let's give you 100% of what you asked for in your cybersecurity budget, 50%, 300%, and let's see where we end up in terms of run this experiment. And if I'm the CFO and you're the CISO, I'm like, Mel, we're spending so much on cybersecurity and nothing ever happens. We can safely cut 50%. Just say which half we can cut, because we're clearly wasting money, because obviously whatever we have, no one is interested in, and we're spending all that money for nothing. So tell me, what can we safely cut?
Right. I have been in that situation year after year after year. And, what a great colleague of mine basically brought out, one of the approaches that they use, right, is, you talk to the CFO, you talk to the rest of the leadership, and you say, okay, tell you what, out of the, $25 million budget, I could save you $5 million. Now, can you please just bring this form to all of the board members and have them sign that they're risk accepting the possibility of the business being down for days upon weeks, the brand visibility. And once they've signed that, I have no problem in cutting those $5 million in tools. Right? No one wants to go to the board to get signature and sign off and risk acceptance on, potential of multiple millions of dollars on a daily, weekly basis.
No, they want to cut the budget so they get the pat on the shoulder and the promotion. But if things go sideways, they still want you to be the scapegoat.
Oh, don't get me started on that one, because you know where that went last year and the year before, right? Like, on accountability and best practices, and people that should know what they should be doing as a CISO or otherwise, and versus what the board. And the funniest thing I've heard is that every board should have an audit committee that has focuses on cybersecurity. Well, 3+ years ago, that was a nuance. Right now, if you don't have it, guess what? SEC is going to be looking at you. Everybody else is going to be looking at you and saying, "Well, why wasn't this, covered under the audit committee?" Right? And for me, working with folks like Bob Zukas and the Digital Directors Network for the last few years on elevating that message. Right? You need board accountability, and even at startups, you need founder accountability. You need them to accept the fact that they do not need admin access to the systems that they built, right? I mean, I've worked with 4 startups, 2 I took public. I've worked with Fortune 10, right? There's got to be a scope, scale, size of a message and a culture that needs to be built, and it's got to come from either the board or the founders, right? And at the end of the day, if you're not addressing the risks and you're not holding the rest of the folks accountable. So you as a CISO or senior security leader, whatever title they have, aren't trying to hold them accountable, that's where you have to bail, right? That's where you have to say, I cannot absorb all of the risk, right? And if you're telling me I got to cut 50% of my budget, guess what? That's putting me at risk, not you, me, because I'm to be the one to blame. So there's a lot of conversations and contentious things that are happening. What everyone has to realize is, yes, they're not going to be at a nation state threat. They're not going to be at a $55 to $70 million a day loss because of the network of connectivity and everything else. But they are always going to be as a threat. It could be somebody local. It could be somebody national, or it could be somebody international. You have something that people want. They may want to just disrupt your business just to cause,
it could be someone internal. It could be a disgruntled employee. It could be, there's no shortage of things. But Mel, I think it's a very interesting conversation. And specifically, I would just, the example that you gave, I think it's very interesting. And I just want to kind of role play a little bit. So if I'm the up and coming, less experienced CISO, I'm super excited about this new role. I know it's a bit less money, but it's a lot more visibility. I'm stepping into this large organization. It's a lot of responsibility. It's stretched for me. I'm super excited. And then the CFO comes in, well, we're having a tough year. Your budget is cut 25%. So do more with less. So I'm still excited, but I see where this is going. And there is a possibility that a position like that, obviously without specific people, specific companies, it's almost becoming a fool's errand in a way that this person is putting himself or herself in a position where, as you said, if things go sideways, all eyes will be on them. It could be career ending. Not only that, there is personal legal liability that people are not aware of. And I think that some of the recent cases kind of brought that a little bit more to the forefront. People are not realizing that often they need a counsel that's not a corporate counsel, their personal counsel, to advise them of their liability. I think it's, I think at kind of maybe Fortune 10, Fortune 50 level, CISOs do understand like,
oh yeah,
what's going on, but I think kind of a few levels below, not necessarily. But on this, on the other hand, if you're a seasoned CISO with years of experience, with certain expectations, with understanding how the game is played, with understanding what can make an organization secure, I think it's unfortunate, unfair, and extremely frustrating to see companies making, in the end of the day, suboptimal choices in placing in filling those positions, because they may be going after kind of quick short-term wins at the expense of really.
Let me jump in on that because it sounds derogatory. Let me jump in on that because it sounds derogatory that I'm saying junior people or less experienced. Don't get me wrong. There are some folks who have the ability to be able to champion these roles, right? Who have enough to do that. But what they need is they need the backing of a network, right? They need mentors, they need coaches. They need to make sure that they are as resourceful. So joining the right groups, joining the right scenario, so that they continue their learning, right? So I don't want to be dismissive of the component, right, or the experience component of it. So I just want to throw that in before I start getting hate mail. Yeah, but go ahead. Sorry.
No. But it's, I think it. Well, you mentioned that the compensation package would be a consideration. So it's kind of compensation is commensurate with experience, which kind of goes back to our previous conversation. But I think what would benefit both cases, the up and comer and kind of the seasoned CISO, is, as you said, the framework where they can say, hey, CEO or the board or the hiring officer, this is the framework to understand risk. You can go left. There's the probabilities and there's the outcomes. You can go right. You can go straight. So these are the options, and these are the probabilities of outcomes, and this is the range of outcomes. What are you comfortable with? And to have something like this, I think it will go a long way for the board, for regulators, for department heads outside of cybersecurity. I think it would, to understand, because oftentimes people say we accept the risk without really understanding what it is.
Yes. So I've created communications in a sense of using things like nuclear and where you come into an organization, and I've done this a couple of times. Within 2-3 days, I'm like, oh dear, I see where the issues are. I know what I need to focus on. Now I need to work on quantifying, qualifying, getting deeper into the crown jewels. So the ability to be able to communicate that, the ability to be able to get a commitment, right? So each organization, and I just had this conversation at one of the CISO conversations that we had, one of the CISO dinners. Each organization has a different scope, scale, size, and priority, right? So again, startup to enterprise. So what you need to come in with is, what is the priority? Right? Is the priority that you have an existing SOC team that's fatigued, exhausted, scattered, can't address, can't be proactive, can't be reactive, or otherwise because of whatever, right? Culture or otherwise. Is the issue that you feel you don't have enough coverage and that there's systems that are sliding under the radar? So you've got leakage, you've got all kinds of other things. So once you start to identify what the scope is, then you can actually say, okay, here's the best approach, a framework, or, and you can pick, there's plenty of them out there, right? And then you can do the assessments of whether or not they're running, whether it's MITRE or, table topics or anything else in the right format, in the right tone, and including the right people. But all of this is a top-down piece, but it's built by getting the bottom up to contribute, right? I will never go into an organization and lay down the hand of God and say, we need to use this system and we need to. No, there's no way, right? Even if it's greenfield, right? I need to talk to the developers. I need to talk to the networking. I need to talk to anybody who's in there, legal, HR, and say, what do we currently have? What can we build? And the way to stay adaptable, right, to this young audience that may be aspiring is to do kind of as I've done in my career, is become the MacGyver of IT or security, right? And, you're going to hire me, Misha, and you're going to say, Mel, I need you to build a Taj Mahal. And I'm going to say, oh, okay, right? And then you're going to give me a paper clip, a toothpick, and a stick of gum and say, get started. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to build you something, right? So to do that, you have to be creative, right? So you can't go to the top right quadrant of other people's, best tools in the planet because you don't have that budget. So what do? You reach out to startups, you reach out to vendors, you try to build relationships. And that is just as important to be able to find the right fit and solution once you understand the ecosystem, the culture, and kind of what the appetite is for change. And you build those in. You build what you need within that structure. And yes, that may mean you've got to gut out some deep loved system because it's 7 to 8 digits in cost.
So certainly, frameworks are good, but they have to be context, stage specific, and context aware. It makes a lot of sense. No, I know we're coming up on time a little bit. I heard that you're building this community of communities that could be used as a resource. I want to hear a little bit about what you're building.
So thank you for that. It is going to be the authoritative resource for IT and security. So I've spent decades coaching and collecting data and doing all kinds of wonderful things, and pointing people over to other communities and other networking groups based on their level. Right. So if you're junior, you go over here. If you're senior, you go over here. Athena and other groups are great for that, right? To be able to create targeted private conversations that, especially in the CISO world, like you cannot just go into a public forum and start sharing some of the things that you share in what I call therapy sessions, and because they're not public, right? And you need advice, right? You need a cohort, but also you get into these groups that you pay $3,000 to $10,000 to $30,000 to get into, and guess what? Not everybody has that. So you have this top level of great informational groups that share, are genuine, are beautiful, but then you have the groups that I work with as well, which are nonprofits that help educate, elevate. So folks like techimpact.org or Gracie.org, grcie.org, who are training or retraining or providing career-changing opportunities to learn GRC, to get CCSK certified, to get A+ certified. And then you have this void in the middle because they don't know where to go to next. They don't know what to do. They don't know what they should focus on. They don't know about events that they may have access to. So what I wanted to build was a community that pulled that together. So what I'd like to do is, as we just launched this, is to call out all the senior leaders on the bullshit that they throw out to say, yes, I want to help. And say, oh, you want to help? Join this community. Add content, your own or otherwise, share information. And you know what? If you see somebody who's interested, who needs mentoring, pick a person and mentor them. Come in and become a sustaining member, which will then sponsor training courses for them, or a waiver fee for certification, right? Reach back and help people pull up. So I am going to be onboarding several nonprofit communities in there. I just finished connecting in with the Treasure Hacks group from San Diego, who's going to be adding their community components in there. I've got Nearshore Cyber, who's going to be adding their backdoors and breaches, their Linux user group, and a lot of other content and information in there. I'm working with API Sec community, beautiful training programs to make sure that they have that they're accessible from our platform, but also we're going to work on customized content that we can add in the courseware for the platform. And we're going to be offering free training as sponsors come in to support that, right? Any sponsor that comes in has to come in with content, has to have an active community member that's contributing, and it's a community that's going to build itself. So while I'm starting it, I'm sucking in everybody that I know to be able to provide information. So I know a lot of great folks who run their own Slack groups and Discord groups. Yes, keep doing that. I will point out to you, but I want you to come back when you've got materials, when you've got things you want to share. I'm going to have AMAs, Ask Mel Anything, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be doing it both on career, IT, and technical. So we're going to be running those on a monthly basis. Mentoring groups who need a home for where their documents or where their chats or anything else might want to live can come in. I can create a private channels and societies for them, public channels and societies for them. Anything anybody wants to do to be able to contribute to community that actually helps people educate and elevate them. You'll see my mission. You'll see my story. We're working on the actual domain and everything else. But for the most part, the baseline is there. We've gotten some good traction and some great partnerships, and I'm looking for more. Right. I'm looking for groups like, I'm looking for like groups of others to contribute.
That's great. Mel, I will include the link in the show notes, but just as we talk, where can people go to sign up to check it out?
So right now it'll be, so it's the Fellowship of Digital Guardians. And right now it's fdg.etc.limited. We're going to work on the domain. I've been trying to find a really good one. So it's FTC, and then ETC is the group that I started, which is Elite Technical Concierge .limited. So FDG.etc.limited. I will tell you, this has been something that's been in my brain for the last decade. It's been in my heart for the last 3 to 4 years, and I'm just running with it. And whatever happens. I've got support from the core platform that we've put this on. So we're going to actually follow up again to see how do we build up more features to help the community make the connections that they need. You'll see global events in there. We've already got an international reach from England to France to Latin America in the platform. And this is a safe space for folks to ask the questions, whether you're a career building person, mid-level or senior, to be able to contribute and help. Great partners from some of the other communities that I've just spoken to. So looking forward to really building that out. And we can all have a contest, and who can design the best domain, best graphics, best anything, because it's a community, and I want to make sure that it's run that way.
Certainly, I think it's very, very much needed. As you mentioned, the middle ground is missing for someone who's just kind of starting, and for people who are kind of not necessarily retiring, but kind of seasoned and willing and capable of giving back. I think it'll be a great channel to do that. Mel, I know we're coming up on time. Thank you so much for taking your time for this and sharing your insights. It was lots of fun. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
You'll see my snarky picture out there, Mel Reyes, pink shirt. Today I decided to go with a less traditional black hoodie, because I'm still that hacker child, in just an older body. But you'll see me there. I will also be at InfoSec next week, and really looking forward to seeing anyone at all the events that I can.
Awesome. We'll be there on Monday, so maybe a cafecito. We'll grab a
Absolutely.
in real life.
Yes.
In real
There's going
life.
to be a whole lot of cafecitos going on next week.
Mel, thank you so much. This was awesome. This was great.
Awesome. Thank you, Misha.